Today, I want to talk a little bit about the Paycheck Protection Program. The SBA has announced that the initial round of funding has already run out. What are you guys working on in Congress to add more?
Sure. No, it's a great question because the Paycheck Protection Program has proven to be wildly popular, reasonably effective. Obviously, it's run out of $350 billion in fewer than 2 weeks. So obviously, there's a high demand for the product, and the early glitches seem to have been worked out. Here's what's happening. The Republicans have a clean bill to add $250 billion into the existing Paycheck Protection Program so that the banks and the lending institutions can continue to lend. In fact, there are many applications that have been approved that just simply can't receive the money until we put more money into it. There are people of both Republicans and Democrats who would like to expand the program, maybe make some modifications. And of course, Democrats have a whole bunch of other things that they'd like, and they want to hold those things up to get the Paycheck Protection Program further funded. I think there's a compromise in the making. I think we can get to it quickly. What I suggested in a phone call with the president this morning is that we would try to get Democrats to agree to a clean $250 billion of new money right into the existing program so the lending institutions and the small businesses can continue to work together while we work on adding more money and maybe broadening the eligibility. And by broadening, I mean I'd like to see some changes made to some of the franchise pieces, the affiliate pieces. We can elaborate on that if you'd like. Democrats would like some of those same things. They'd also like to see certain segment of the money specified for particular groups of small businesses. I don't have a strong objection to that, but politics is the art of the possible, and right now it's out of money. We have a clean voice vote that could add $250 billion. We ought to do that right away and then work towards some of these other things.
Do you have any idea on a timeline?
I do not. I was on the call this morning with the president and a number of both Republican and Senate Democratic senators as part of our task force to reopen the government. I then talked to the president alone after that on a private phone call. Right now, it pretty much is in the court of Democrats. If they would just simply allow this $250 billion on a voice vote, we could do that in a matter of minutes or hours. If they insist on filling the bill with a whole bunch of other stuff that has yet to be negotiated or debated while we've been there, that's going to be a problem because clearly every senator is back home in their home state, or at least most of us are, the vast majority of us are. Same with the House of Representatives. We're not in a position right now to pass new legislation, but we have this vehicle and we have this dollar amount that we could pass on a simple voice vote as long as there's no one to object. That said, I do believe that even working remotely, we could come to some agreement on broadening the eligibility as well as targeting some of the money to specific small businesses. I know for Speaker Pelosi, the digital economy is really important. The Silicon Valley entrepreneur is important. They don't fit sometimes in the same in the SBA category. I know they'd like to set aside some of the money specifically for minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. I don't have a strong objection to that either. It's just that would take a little longer, which is why I'm saying let's do a straight-up $250 billion with the existing program, and let's work on these other things. And if it takes us a couple of days, I think even working remotely, we could come up with some sort of an agreement.
So essentially, you're saying act now in regards to the PPP and then later get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, and I actually think that the Paycheck Protection Program is a vehicle that we can broaden. So in other words, because the 7A SBA program has been in existence for a long time, this vehicle that we've put the Paycheck Protection Program in does work. And our community banks, in fact, the president told us this morning, it's really been the community banks across the country, and that's what North Dakota is largely made up of, that have really distributed these funds in a good way to small businesses. In North Dakota, most of the loans have been for $350,000 or less. So we know it's working for the intended audience. But the only way to change the eligibility piece of it is in the law itself. The SBA and the Treasury Department have already done everything they can within the law and within their existing structure. So that's what I mean by let's get the money into the into the pipeline right now. That's going right where it's supposed to go and quite effectively, and then work on these other things apart from that with a strong commitment by everybody. One thing I would say is I haven't found a Democrat or a Republican yet that thinks it's a bad idea to get more money in a benevolent way into the hands of workers and small business employers. We can make some improvements to it, but let's keep the momentum going while we make the improvements.
I have two quick questions. Number
Sure.
one, if you do go to apply for small business relief on the website, you can't right now.
Yeah.
Do you have any words of encouragement or advice to small business owners who are in the waiting period?
Yeah, it's a really important question because, first of all, I might just, give a little bit of a caveat to the fact that for some people that we did add to the 7A program, especially private contractors, sole proprietorships, self-employed, that was a little trickier, and they didn't really get into the queue until a week after the Paycheck Protection Program kicked off. So they've already been disadvantaged to some degree. So my word of encouragement would be there's really no opposition to doing what we want to do in terms of adding money to the Paycheck Protection Program. I think now that it's completely run out, that members of Congress on both sides see the urgency of the moment and hopefully will accept something like I'm offering, and that is fill it, add the $250 billion as is, and let our community bankers go back to work with the small businesses, and then let's work out other details of eligibility on the side, and we can add to it after that. So my word of encouragement is there's really nobody that's against doing what we want to do fundamentally. It's the details that have people hung up. I would also say, though, if you know some members of Congress or you have some phone numbers, do call and encourage people to get with it. Don't sit around and argue about perfect when we have something that's actually working pretty well.
And lastly, I know you mentioned going back and finessing the legislation later. Is there anything in your mind that will expand to help agriculture workers?
Yeah, it's a great question. The good news is that the Paycheck Protection Program already does apply to farmers and ranchers and in agricultural industries that fit the eligibility of small business, which is just about every producer in North Dakota, maybe is every producer in North Dakota. Besides that, the USDA does have some programs that they're working on. We were able to get an additional $14 billion from the CARES Act into the Commodity Credit Corporation, which is one of the tools that Secretary Sonny Perdue has used quite effectively in market facilitation, for example, and an additional $9.5 billion for creative new programs that the USDA is coming up with, and those programs would even be able to be used by the livestock industry, for example, specialty crops, farmers markets, some of the parts of agriculture that don't fit into the traditional safety net programs. So all of those tools are available, and by the way, we also were able to get a number of the FCS programs into and the lenders into the Paycheck Protection Program who were not previously SBA approved lenders, but now they are. FCS is a farm credit system, so that's been very good to help our farmers and agriculture producers have access to these programs.
Great, thank you for your comments. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on while I have you?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe I would just add this for you, if you use it if you want, or if you guys work on another program, or another story. But one of the things I told the president today is that in my lifetime, we've never had a president that was as committed and really honored cooperative federalism the way this president has, and whether it's in the rollout of Waters of the U.S. or the Affordable Clean Energy Act or any number of other programs, he's always had a good balance between the federal government's role and the state's role. And I just encouraged him that as we roll out, a plan to restart our economy, let's do it in the same manner that he rolled it back, and that is guidelines from the federal government, support from the federal government, but control at the state and local level. And I hope that's the way that we get this country and this economy rolling again. And of course, like I said, he's done that as well or better than anybody, and I hope that we can continue that.